We got Max Holloway taking on Dustin Poirier. That's a very interesting one, and I haven't given you guys a full analysis of that, but I am ready to right now. And here is the thing. You have to understand, whenever I'm talking to you guys, I don't talk to you with the fan in me. I don't talk to you with the analyst in me. I don't even talk to you with the fellow competitor in me. I talk to you guys as though you are going to take my opinion and then go part with your money. And some of you are bettors and most of you are not, but I speak to you all the same, which is as fair and analytical and opinionated and in-depth as I can, because I think that you're going to go part with your money. So I want to make sure that I at least do my part to influence you correctly. I've been on quite a hot streak lately, but overall, I'm not wonderful at picking this. My opinions, though, leading in are we just see so many intangibles. We see so many variables in this sport. It's part of why athletes love it, part of why fans love it. It's part of why bettors need to be careful. Well, let me talk to you about Max and Dustin. Guys, let me just lead with this. You have to bet on Max. You have to bet on Max if you're a bettor, and here's why. Max is going to throw more punches and more kicks. He is going to have a higher volume and a higher pace than Dustin is, okay? That's going to happen. Now, let me put this in different terms for you. I have to tell you guys, something very funny just happened. Before we started recording this, I'm in my room right now. Before we started recording this, I ordered a pop. I ordered myself a Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola came. I knew at some point we were going to be interrupted with a light knock on the door. What's funny about this is we got a knock on the door followed by somebody at the door shouting, "Room service is here." Okay, so doubly interrupted, but now you know we record live. So here's the thing. If this were any other sport, and I'm talking about volume, I'm talking about output, I'm talking about guaranteed that Max is going to do more than Dustin. If this was a different sport, let me use basketball by example, okay? The Lakers are getting ready to play the Suns. If I tell you ahead of time, the Lakers are going to try to score 100 baskets, and the Suns, and I guarantee you this ahead of time, are going to try to score 65 baskets. Just on that information, I do not think you would have to get into home court advantage. I do not think you would have to get into who's scheduled and who's rested and who's playing and who's starting and whose records are better. If I told you before the game, for sure, here's the numbers, the Lakers are going to try to score 100 times, and the Suns are going to try to score 65 times. As a handicapper, you would have to place your bets on the Lakers. You just would. That's how I feel this situation is. Max is simply going to throw more strikes. It's as simple as that. If you're betting, excuse me, very hot in Atlanta. Good drink of my tasty soda. Okay. Now, I'm well aware that there's still a conversation here, okay? Where's the conversation begin? Well, let's look at history as the greatest trajectory for the future and the fact that these guys have already fought and Dustin beat him. So it's not as though somebody doesn't have a leg to stand on and doesn't have plenty of arguments that they could bring up for the Dustin Poirier side. I'm just telling you, if you don't know which way to go on this bet, use the analogy that I just gave you of the basketball teams. Know who's going to try more things. That's where you need to reasonably put your bet. But you must also understand, it's a gamble. Dustin Poirier's already beat him. There's something to be said for confidence. Dustin Poirier knows that he can beat him because he has beaten him. Max, also going into this contest, has to know there's a lot on me right now. I don't know what's going to happen with my future. I don't know what's going to happen with my future at 145 pounds. Are they even going to let me return? It would appear to be a foregone conclusion that they will be stripping Max Holloway of a 145-pound championship belt, particularly if he beats Dustin, and particularly if that sets up with a fight with Khabib that has been speculated on September in Abu Dhabi. However, even with a loss, can Max go back down? I don't know the answer to that question, but can he go back down? Is his belt still there? Yeah, I think so. I don't think he just gets stripped just because. But he has had trouble with 145 pounds in the past. He's never missed it, contrary to what popularly gets reported all the time. He has never missed weight, including the fight in New York against Khabib. He did not miss weight. You guys have those details in those fights. You're misremembering that. But the point is fair that he has had a hard time making weight. So now, taking his eye off that 145-pound ball for the last 3+ months, I would imagine his body has grown at least a little bit, and 145 may not be something that he wants to do. Why do I bring that up? Well, it's probably on his mind in some levels. He probably is feeling a pressure. He is probably feeling a do or die moment in conjunction with the fact that he's going in there against a guy who already got the jump on him once in the past. And again, if we were to look at history as the greatest prediction for the future, that first fight has to mean something, which is contrary to how I started this entire piece by telling you, you must bet on Max. There's also something to be said for power. I believe the power is with Poirier. And as much as it does make sense to you guys, and it makes sense to me as well, that if Max is going to throw more shots, we just have to assume that Max is going to be able to win. I think that's fair. Mike Tyson did not throw more shots than most of his opponents. He just threw a hell of a lot harder shots. So there is, back to the conversation, intangibles. There are variables. There are things that you don't consider. I do think if you look at that first fight, I know it's very easy for people to simply say, well, they're both totally different fighters. Now, I don't know about that. First off, I don't know about that. It does look to me that they are both better now. If Max today was fighting Max of back then, yes, I would predict that Max of today would kick old Max's ass. If Dustin of today was fighting the Dustin of back then, yes, I would predict to you that Dustin of today kicks old Dustin's ass. But that's not what's happening. It's Max of today versus Dustin of today. I do think they're both better, but I also think they progressed at the same rate. I think it was a positional issue in the last fight. Most of us are expecting a stand-up battle. I am one of those people. I find their wrestling and their grappling to be very close. I don't know that I even see one of them as having a meaningful advantage. However, in the last fight, when it got onto the ground, of which Dustin initiated, Dustin was able to advance position not only once to pass guard, not only a second time to get to mount, but 3 times to get to a mounted triangle, which he then transitioned into an arm bar. So if you were to look at that first fight, you would say, Chael, how could you say that? Dustin is much better on the ground. I don't know about that. Regardless of what we saw, I don't know about that. I don't even know if he was much better that night. I think that he had an element of surprise. And that isn't to be a knock on Dustin. I'm just sharing with you guys that if you look at that first fight, particularly the ending sequence, and you think, wait, these guys are going to fight again, this is an easy one. I don't think it's quite so easy. I think that you do have a very different fight on your hands. And there is a question of what propelled both of these guys, and it does tie back to Conor McGregor in many ways. When Max fought Conor McGregor, and Conor's only his second fight in the company, Max was brought in as a 20-year-old that was supposed to get beat up. Later, we found out that Conor actually, in his second fight within the company, took out one of the greatest fighters to exist. The point is, Max used that as a real motivation, and I don't know why. He's never spoke on that. I've never heard anybody ask him point blank, Max, why? Why was a loss at 20 years old to Conor McGregor on an undercard something that motivated you so much? Because if we were to look at your career and your history and your resume and your fights and the results of said contest, it would appear by the data in front of us that was a turning point. How come? And the same could be said for Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier has always been a great fighter. Always. But there very much appeared to be something, again, if you were to go back and look at his schedule and look at his past and his history and his resume and the outcomes and the results of those contests, that there was a turning moment in the loss to Conor McGregor. So many guys get beat and so many guys hang their head and never come back. We see that all the time. We very rarely see somebody get beat and there was something about that loss that was so motivating, it drove them to championship fights and main events and top contender spots years and years and yet another year to come. Excuse me, Coca-Cola. But that is exactly what happened here. And I don't know. I have my own opinions, but I don't know. I also haven't ever asked Dustin Poirier point blank, and I haven't heard anybody else ask him point blank, but I do have an opinion. I think there was a lot of pressure on those fights. And as much as I want to say Conor's fight versus Max was an undercard fight, that's me being very condescending because I was on the card and I was the main event and I'm trying to shine my own wheels. The reality is they were the main event of, and then fill in the blank. Remember all the platforms back then? From the Facebook to the Fight Pass to the FS2 to the FS. Remember all those different platforms? They were the main event of one of those. And at 20 years old for Max, all of the notoriety and all of the pressure and all of the excitement that was surrounding Conor, I think that was a very big moment. I think he had a lot on him. And I think he knew full well, while the world still hadn't yet, that he was in there with more than just a showman. He was in there with a real skilled athlete. I think those pressures, I think being that close to victory, but seeing defeat, I think that is what enabled him to not only get up in the morning, not only push and drive and do all the things that need to be done to be great at the sport, but I think it also allowed him to deal with future pressures. I think as he worked his way up the card and even got into those title fights and those big fights, Jose Aldo comes to mind, Brian Ortega comes to mind. I think he already had a calmness that was built in. I think he's looking around and going, hey, I'm a bit of a veteran of this. Even if I got my comeuppance on an undercard in Boston, I was still only 20 years old. I still had a lot on me. I think the same thing goes for Dustin Poirier. I think it was a pressure issue. I think Dustin Poirier was under a lot. You guys might even remember that fight against Conor McGregor with Dustin. Dustin goes into the hotel. He's trying to check in. He's all by himself. Conor comes up to him. He's got 2 or 3 friends. He confronts Dustin right there at check-ins in their t-shirts and their street clothes. Somebody happened to pick it up on camera. I mean, Dustin had to deal with stuff. There was a welcoming party. There was press conferences where he was being ridiculed, where he was being laughed at, where he was being teased. And then ultimately there was a fight where he did not fare very well. Boy, did he bounce back. Boy, did he recover. And boy, does he belong to be here tomorrow night. I mean, he belongs here. It's the right thing to do, too. I also must say this about Dustin, and not so much about Max. Max has had this in the past. Max had this kind of a coming out party in the past. But for Dustin, this is something that we, the fans, wanted. This wasn't just him working hard and him scratching and clawing. This is something we observed him doing. We observed how many times he was slighted. We observed how many times he could have been put in that spot, but for whatever reason wasn't. And there's other guys like him. But when it happens, we do tend to feel a little bit drawn towards him and go, hey, enough's enough. This guy's got to be given the opportunity. Whether he gets it or not, whether he achieves it or not, that's on him. He's got to be given the opportunity. And I think that's right. I think that's right. And I think that's something why we are so drawn to this fight. It isn't just to see who can win the rematch. It isn't just to see who's going to be the interim champion and set up the Khabib fight further down the road, the storyline for the division in 2019. It really is because Dustin Poirier entertained us, sacrificed himself, and deserves a title opportunity.